Hey, greetings everybody. How you doing? Hope everybody's taking care. This is Joe Driscoll back with the Salt City Grind. So thought I'd do something different today. No guests. I do have some great guests coming up later this week on Thursday. I'm going to be interviewing Hassan Stevens with the Good Life Foundation on Thursday at 5 o'clock. So that's coming up on Thursday. On Tuesday of next week, I'm going to be interviewing Chief Kenton Buckner, having a conversation with the chief to talk about recent events, talk about this conversation around police accountability and everything that's going on. So that's coming up next Tuesday. So once again, Hassan Stevens on Thursday, Chief Buckner next Tuesday. So we got some guests coming up, but today I thought there's a couple of things that have been on my mind that I wanted to talk to people about. One is the lead ordinance. So a lot of people were asking me about the police contract and where it was, and that was another thing that basically with COVID and everything that's going on with the crisis, with coronavirus, the police contract kind of got lost in the shuffle of the headlines of what was going on. So I don't think a lot of people followed what was going on at the council, that the police contract got voted down in March. It happened right as the coronavirus took in, as stay-at-home stuff started, as shelter-in-place started. So it really got lost in the sauce for the headlines. Similarly, I'm feeling the same about the lead ordinance. So this is an effort I've been working on for a number of years now. When I started running for office, I was researching it, started organizing a group to discuss lead poisoning, to learn more about it, and worked on it for a really long time. And so we finally, last council session, we introduced the lead ordinance. And so tomorrow night, today is Tuesday, tomorrow, Wednesday, at 5:30, we'll be having a public meeting to discuss all the details of the new lead ordinance. You can join us via WebEx. I'll share the link below. If you look at my page, I have a couple of posts. The last few posts have been about the lead ordinance and what's going on. So Cliff's Notes of the lead ordinance. Basically, currently, a lot of people are aware about lead poisoning in Syracuse. We have, about 11% of children in Syracuse suffer from experiencing lead poisoning. In certain neighborhoods, though, that's 20 to 25% of kids. Some neighborhoods have very little. Some neighborhoods have it very concentrated. So, we have this problem. We've been trying to develop solutions. So what we did was, when I ran for office, I started researching Rochester's program. We've developed legislation similar to what Rochester did, and that's about to come before the council. Tomorrow we'll discuss the details about how we're going to change it. So currently, lead paint is not a code violation in the city of Syracuse. If you have chipping paint in your house, there's no law that identifies it or makes you aware of the problem. What this new legislation would do is go in and we'd inspect for lead, we'd check for lead, do dust wipes when we do home inspections, and afterwards inform the tenants about the lead and, cite the landlords and compel them to improve the property. So I don't know how many people were aware that this has been going on, but this legislation, as I said, has been years in the making. It's been been a very Sisyphus type stroll, trying to get up the hill with this legislation, working hard. So, tomorrow we'll be discussing the merits. If you want to learn more about it, if you want to check it out, get involved, figure out what's going on with this lead thing. We'll also have Dr. Korfmacher from Rochester come and tell us about it. A lot of the situation with landlords are very nervous about this. It can cost $50,000, $60,000 to remove all the lead from a home. So it can be cost prohibitive, as urgent as it is. So what we are hoping to do through our testing process is to make it safe. So to at least cover the lead in a situation. So again, these are Ask Me Anything episodes. I'm going to click to the comments now. If people have any questions, they can shoot it out. let me know if they have any questions about the lead ordinance, about what's going on. So that's going to be, we're going to have a public meeting tomorrow evening, 5:30. You can hop on the WebEx. And so that, I was trying to give you a cliff note. So basically what we do is we can't remove every drop of lead paint from every structure in Syracuse. We just don't have the resources or the means to do that. So what we hope to do is to, through maintenance, clean the areas, get rid of the chipping paint, add a fresh coat of paint, try to improve the quality. So at least the dust is not breaking up, getting into the children's lungs, getting onto their hands, so they're eating them. And this is, this is a big problem. 90% of the housing stock in Syracuse has lead paint base because they were built before 1980, before it was outlawed. So this is, this is what we found in Rochester. They've had a lot of great success. So we're trying to, implement it here in Syracuse. So that's coming. So a big concern that I've talked about with people, and where I'll go with, yes, grind my gears. That's Mark's Fat Forest said, yes, it's true. I'm gonna get sued by Family Guy, but I'm okay with that. So when we talk about the lead legislation that's coming up that we're trying to implement, we've had a few public meetings. We've had a lot of discussion amongst the council. I feel very good about the support. We've been trying to develop this legislation and make sure it's airtight. And it leads, this is a foundational structural problem that leads to increasing and accelerating the problem of inequity in Syracuse. It's typically the most, the most challenged areas, economically challenged, usually the most segregated. A lot of brown and black families have been the victim of lead poisoning due to the poor quality of housing. So this is something that has a real potential to change multiple other facets of life in Syracuse. So it's really, it's been my passion project for a few years. I can't believe we're almost there to the point where the ordinance will be adopted. When I got into office, I thought it would take me a month or two to implement this legislation, and here we are 2 years down the road. So Gretchen asks, if you have a house that was built before 1980, should you have it tested for lead? Yes, I would say, so here's the thing, with 90% of the housing stock in Syracuse has a layer of lead paint underneath somewhere. So the thing to remember is, the problem is the chipping of the paint. When the paint breaks up into fine dust, and it breaks up and it chips, that's where you run into problems. That's where you run into poisoning. So if you have a house built before 1980, you can assume that pretty much what they used before then, before it became outlawed in 1978, there was a base layer of lead paint. So de facto, many of the houses do, but it's always a concern, but the trouble only comes in when it's exposed, when it's chipping, when it's out there. So that's kind of the educational piece we're trying to get out there, is to teach people about the maintenance of lead paint. So hope that answers your question. So try to give you some cliff notes of this new legislation that's coming up. And the other big question, which will lead into my second topic, what I wanted to discuss today was, the implementation. Now, we can make laws as legislators, but how is it implemented? For example, jaywalking is illegal, but people do it all the time, right? So we can make lead a code violation, but will we have the capacity and the means to test every house, to get out there and to implement this? Because passing the law in and of itself is one thing, but having the capacity to check every house and the ability to check every house is another challenge. So really, although this has been a years-long struggle to get this legislation implemented and do all this stuff, really the war has only begun. This is only the beginning of the lead issue. So that goes to capacity and what we can do. And, Councilor Rudd has been very critical of the Syracuse Codes Department. Ken Towsley is leaving from the head of codes, and Jake Dishaw, who just revamped our permitting system for the city of Syracuse, is taking over at codes. For the record, Ken was a great guy. I was a big fan. I think he worked hard. But Jake is, a fresh set of eyes. We're going to try to revamp things with codes. But that brings me to my second point of, so big issues I wanted to talk about that I feel aren't getting discussed enough that need to be discussed here in Syracuse. Things that we need to be paying attention to, in my opinion. So one is the lead ordinance. That's coming up. We've got a committee meeting tomorrow night at 5:30. The other thing I wanted to discuss was the funding, right? So the funding for the lead program. Originally, we had discussed, $750,000 increase in the budget for codes to make sure that the lead program was implemented effectively. Right now, we are dealing with such uncertainty from our federal government. And this is something that is massive and important, and I don't think is being discussed. And so I wanted to get into this because the city of Syracuse, for example, there's projections, right? And what are projections? Projections are educated guesses, right? So we don't have exact science on what's going on with COVID, with coronavirus. But our guess is we're losing massive amounts of money while this economy is shut down. This isn't just a Syracuse problem. This is a national problem. So we're talking about, potential windfalls of $40 million, $50 million, and that's up to this point. Governor Cuomo is talking about cutting funding 20% across the board for pretty much everything, So we're looking at a problem now that's so large in scale. It's a national problem. It's not just New York. It's not just Syracuse. We have a situation right now where many, many American cities and states are going to be looking at massive economic losses from COVID. And then I know some conservative friends will blame that all on Cuomo and say you shouldn't have shut down. But even in states, where they didn't have as strict a shutdown as New York, you still saw some of those losses in revenue from people being scared. And I think people are still scared, and it's all going to impact the economy. So we at the city government don't really have the ability to change that situation. We've been handed this massive loss in funding. And it was very clear right away that the federal government rushed right in and got trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into the biggest corporations and the biggest businesses to make sure our stock market was cruising and that everything was going good. But there's still been no clarity from our federal government on what the protocol is going to be going forward. If you have a city like Syracuse, that has this massive loss in revenue that's going to be coming, what is the solution for us? So all of our funding is up for consideration. We don't really know. And this is something that, Congressman Katko went forward and said, we need more money for state and municipal governments. We need more money. That we're forgetting this in the coronavirus breakdown. We're not talking about state and city governments that need funding. But then when the Democratic bill came forward to get money to city and state governments, Congressman Katko was a no vote on that. So this is something that I think the congressional race should be, focused on, and everybody out there should be focused on, because so far, and again, if people have other stuff that they know more extensively than me, please educate me. But the primary thing I've heard up to this point was Mitch McConnell telling us all to file for bankruptcy, telling the state of New York, you can just tap out, So that is very really what states in America are looking at right now. So for those of my friends that are Trump fans or were Trump fans, I liken it to this. What's happening right now is it's very easy to be the pilot when you're in the co-pilot seat or whatever, and the the boat is already out at sea, or the plane is already up in the air, and you hop in and you sit at the seat and you hold the wheel and you look like a pilot or you look like a captain. But we find out if you're really a captain when there's an iceberg straight ahead or there's a mountain straight ahead. So right now, what we're dealing with from the federal government is we're looking at an iceberg. We're looking at a mountain. We're looking at these things. And it's been very unclear what the story is for a lot of American cities. So that's something that I want people to be aware of. Right now, kind of the whole game is being played in this COVID thing without much fanfare or media attention. What is the answer for municipal governments, for state governments? What is the plan? And that is going to be make or break for places like Syracuse and states like New York, whatever the federal government comes back in. So, and there's no easy solution. We're going to need a Sully level pilot. I don't know if you remember that one where the engine went out and the pilot was able to skim the water and keep everybody safe despite coming into a calamity. We're going to need that level of leadership from our federal representatives to pull off some really Jedi ninja moves to get us through this coronavirus, to get us through this COVID situation. And everybody should be waiting on this to hear what our federal government, but they rushed through, they gave us $1,000 and they, rushed through. But yeah, so I think that's important right now as we're talking about this lead program. It's very uncertain what the city's budget is going to look like because we're losing revenue. We're actively losing sales revenue from the shutdown, even though things are opening back up. I mean, if the movie theater is open tomorrow, how many of you are going to pack in seat to seat? Consumer confidence is still going to be down, and nobody knows what the shape of this is. But we are seeing, through Wall Street seemingly moving along, that there's a great transfer of wealth going on right now. There's a great transfer from the lower institute to corporate successes, and billionaires are making billions more. Amazon and others, and Facebook and Google and some of the ones that are fireproof are making billions. And a lot of mom and pop shops are going to go under. So what is the federal government's long-term solution for that? Seeing as, the New York State right now, we're testing at lower than 1% of people testing are coming back positive. That's great. We're flattening the curve. All that social distancing or whatever it seems to be working. We're doing better than we were. We had, 800 people dying a day. Then we had 500 people dying a day. Then 100. Then we had, then we're down to 50. We've been doing better and better. But if this follows the trend of the Spanish flu, we could see a second wave in the fall and winter. That's a possibility. So what's the federal government solution for all this stuff? And we need to be asking our federal reps, what are you guys going to do? Because right now, the only thing I've really heard is, you're on your own, kid. So anyway, that's a long rant. But I think it's a huge thing that we need to be paying attention to. So I'll check in the comments here, see if people have any other Ask Me Anything stuff. But the obvious thing that's on everyone's mind, I put it out earlier, and Ask Me Anything. What do people want to know about my thoughts on or what's going on? A lot of people talked about the defund the police movement, police reform, what's going on with everything. So an update on that. I'd encourage everyone to look. Assemblywoman Pamela Hunter had a rally last Thursday to talk about Carcetti for mayor. So the sorry, that distracted me. So Assemblywoman Hunter had legislation before us about state reform. Now 50A is a huge one. 50A is huge. There was another one called STAT about transparency and data. And I think things like that, you will really see a shift. There's also an article on my page. If you want to check my Facebook pages, my council page, or my personal page, where these two are streaming, an article about what Mayor Walsh has been trying to do here locally in Syracuse, taking police discipline out of the contract negotiations and having a separate body to do that. So those are some big things. We're also looking at the council has 4 or 5 pieces of legislation that were being reviewed before this whole thing occurred, before all the focus came on to police reform. We had legislation in the pipeline for a lot of these issues, a review of use of force. There's a piece of legislation called the right to know, where officers have to identify themselves. So that's all being worked on right now. So just to let you know, there was a conference call yesterday, Monday, between the council, the administration, and our law team, the council leadership, the mayor and his team, and the law team, to review everything that we're doing regarding transparency and accountability. And I think, the mayor and I are both big fans of transparency. I think that helps good cops. And, I hope we can get to a point where we say, any accountability is an act of aggression against the police. I think, if you talk to people, I guess that'll bring me to the defund movement, right? So people are saying defund the police. And a lot of people have been asking me to get on board. I'll tell you, I'm not on board with defunding the police. I want to fund the police to the level that they need to be funded. So this is a nuanced conversation, right? It sounds like a good idea, right? People are like, just invest in schools and don't invest so much into police and things will sort themselves out. I think it sounds good on paper. I'm a district counselor. I've got constituents in my district who call me about a guy who's training pit bulls to fight. And he's got them scrapping in his yard. The neighbors can hear dog fights. He's got 10 friends over there. Some of them have known gang affiliations. They stay up all night. Who's going to go knock on that door? I think people are saying defund the police because you're thinking something sounds good on paper. We had a shooting in we've had a rash of shootings in the last 2 days in Syracuse. Who's gonna find the killer of all these people? I think there's a lot of changes that need to be made. I think a lot of them are in the efforts that Assemblywoman Hunter has made. So, and soon I see someone writing on the effective community review boards. I plan on having Raynette on from the CRB sometime soon in the next couple of weeks, because a lot of people have been asking about Citizens Review Board. For those of you who don't know, a Citizens Review Board is basically a city body to file grievances. If you feel the police have treated you unfairly, they are a body you can file with, the CRB. So you can contact them through the city's website, Raynette Ralford. But the CRB, by design, does not have the authority to implement discipline. Discipline, as it's structured by law, and again, if I'm getting some of this wrong, someone can, but by law, it's structured so that the chief of police is the one who disciplines. So it's a challenge to make the CRB anything more than a body of recommendation. That's been a legal challenge that we've had. So we've tried to, as the council, be supportive of the CRB and to strengthen it, but it seems like there's a lot in there. So that's the thing. I don't think people want to hear about defund. Like, look, I fought in my time for office. I fought for a new community center across from Parkside Commons. We reopened Westmoreland Park. We brought activities back there for the kids. We got staff dedicated to educating children. If you want to talk about crime solutions, I think those are your most effective crime solutions. And Chief Buckner, he had a great thing where someone was asking him what he was going to do about teen shootings in Syracuse. And he said, by the time I get there as an officer, it's too late. the guns are out, the knives are out. We respond to violence. If you want to stop violence, that's a community effort. You have to have good education, good teachers, good parents, good community. Aunties and uncles that sit on the porch to tell you not to pick up that litter. That's what our community needs. Around here in my neighborhood, me and my neighbors are always bantering back and forth, looking out for each other, talking, having those dialogues. Community fabric is what stops us. That's not to say police don't have a role. Police have a role. But so you want to talk about, I get where the defund movement is coming from. We need to spend more money on making sure kids are well educated, that kids have things to do, and that's your most effective crime deterrent. But at the same time, we're in a country in America where we have the Second Amendment is sacred to so many people, and so many people have guns, and there's such an education, there's such a culture and environment of glorifying violence that I don't think removing police from the equation is going to solve that or help that. I think we need to look at police reform right now and education. But I'm not with the defund movement. And that's something that we've talked about on the council. The police feel very strongly that they are underfunded, that they need more officers on the street. And there are people who are completely critical of that feel the exact opposite is true. So I'll tell you, you only know what you see. What I see. I like Chief Buckner. The two captains I work with, Captain Lynch and Captain Fournier, that represent the city, have been awesome. They've been really responsive. There's been a lot of cultural change in the city of Syracuse over the last few years. But I think, when I talk about political change all the time, I talk about the analogy is like losing weight. Like, you may need to lose 200 pounds, and you may think you needed to do that. You need to do that tomorrow. You need to lose 60 pounds by the end of this month, or 80 pounds by the end of this month. I can't deny that. Arguably, you should have lost it. You should have never put it on in the first place. But we have to move at a rate of change where it's enduring, and we hold the center and we're able to endure. So I think it's tough. This is a really, really tough time, a really tough situation. But I think we have seen change here in Syracuse over the last few years. And I'm going to have Chief Buckner on Tuesday to talk to him in depth and ask him about everything that's gone on, the rallies, what's going on with police reform, what's going on with accountability, what's going on with transparency, and particularly what we're doing in Syracuse, so we can talk more about that. So, again, we are looking at the city level. We're looking at everything we're doing. Read the article today about what Mayor Walsh has been trying to do about getting disciplinary situations out of the contract. I think that's a huge move. That would be a game changer. All the things around that legislation, if you want to look up what's going on with the city right now, that's hugely informative. The council is looking at every piece of legislation we can implement that we think is fair. But the most important game changer is at the state level. For example, a lot of people reach out to me asking the council to do something about 50A. That's not in our purview. That is at the state level. I just saw Mark Spatafor ask, where does the contract stand? So the council voted down, for those of you that weren't watching the exchange, and that's the other thing. For example, residency. The council wanted residency. It was clear. We did a tour of the city. We asked the city what did they want to see from the police. Residency was one of the first things that came out of everybody's mouth. They wanted the police to live in the city. Over 90% of our police officers don't live in the city of Syracuse. People wanted to see that. So we negotiated it, and the council felt that it was too much to pay to get residency. So it has been sent to arbitration, and right now we're going to be talking to the mayor and with the council. So it hasn't gone into arbitration yet, but we are looking at arbitration. So right now the contract is in limbo. for the police contract, and we hope to reopen that conversation about how we're going to engage with the police contract moving forward in the union. And Director Mark Spatafort just said Utica is passing a resolution in support of 50A. Councilor Bay is right now advancing a resolution to support the repeal of 50A. He is advancing a resolution in support of all of the slate of legislative actions that the state assembly is proposing, that Assemblywoman Hunter is proposing. So the city government will pass, we'll have a resolution before them to vote on about all the initiatives that are happening at the state level. Mary Kuhn asked about the charter change. So in the article about Mayor Walsh's hopes to get discipline out of the contract negotiations, it mentioned in the article that there was an old charter part that presented an obstacle, and Mary reached out to me, and another constituent reached out to me to say, why doesn't the city look at that changing the charter to make that more viable? So we are exploring that, and we are going to look into that further. So these are all things that are happening. So the contract, again, the council felt we really wanted residency. There were incentives in there to encourage officers, fiscal incentives to learn new languages, to get degrees, to stay on the force longer. There were a lot of incentives in there that the council just wasn't on board with. So we voted the contract down, and we are now looking at it again. Mark is asking if the Syracuse schools contract for the police to provide SRO. I do believe that's correct. I don't want to speak out of school, but I do think that's correct. So that's my friend Justin said best change is success, and anything comes down to consistency. And I believe that. I think with this police change, with accountability, you have two things going on right now. I organized the walkouts in my high school around Rodney King. That was 30 years ago now, and George Floyd does not make one think that things have gotten dramatically better. So we need change, but I'm also, we need to be consistent in our change. We need to make enduring changes that make sense and that don't, with anything. Like if you look at, and this is, I'm getting too political philosophy here, but when you look at environmental regulation, for example, you do have to factor in, you want to enable a business to do their job, and you want to protect the earth. And so you try to find, that's what politics is, negotiating a compromise. For me, the environment is up here and business concerns are down here, but we live in a society where we all have to, come together and find these compromises. So I think with police accountability, I think we need to find some smart compromise. Okay, Raven said, defund doesn't mean disband. We need police, but they need training along the lines of degrees. They need immunity removed. Citizens Review Board needs to be in charge of discipline, decentralize them into smaller areas, and they need to live in the area they serve. So this is something the council, and again, this is, and demilitarize, it also means demilitarize. So a lot of those things, So, I get, I said to someone, defund is, they're starting the negotiations here, which I get. Okay. But, a lot of those things I think are relative. A lot of those things are important. Immunity removed, certainly. I think that accountability and transparency are important, and I hope we take this moment. I hope we can act quickly enough while the political climate is still this way to come to a compromise, because I think a lot of officers that I've seen feel the same way. Let me look through the comments here. Police are asked to do too much. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a very valid conversation about mental health stuff. That's another conversation we've had often in the city. My friend Sonny Aslam, if anyone knows Sonny, has been a big proponent of this for years. I helped him negotiate meetings with state and county reps to propose, when you have someone who's swinging on an invisible enemy on a street corner, they don't need a cop. They need a mental health professional. So I'm really hopeful we can incorporate that into the conversation. I agree. Get police out of the cars, walk the beat, so the community is familiar with that. That is a big part of some of the reforms the mayor and Chief Buckner have tried to do, both in our codes department in the city and in our police department. We've been going with this localized approach to split the city into smaller and smaller chunks. So exactly that, so that the code inspector would know their neighborhood. They would have a few block radius that was theirs. The officers would know their area and be more familiar. So that's kind of what we're trying to do in Syracuse, is to break it up into smaller chunks so people know. Jason says the CRB needs to be more vocal and their recommendations should carry more weight in the local media. No one even knows who is on the panels. Yep. Teaching officers de-escalation techniques, that's something. Phil says get the police back in the pools. That's something we've heard a lot. Restructuring the police. Defund is a bad word. Oh yeah, we got Cynthia Brenson. She's on the board. I saw her out at the rally. She's at the CRB board. Yeah, and Mary says, how about reimagine? Defund is maybe a bad word, but I think that's important. With a lot of these words, where Mark Twain had a great line that said, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. So I think it's important the language that we use, because when you hear defund the police, look, I didn't create the phrase defund the police. If people want me to sign on to it, I'm not going to sign on to that phrase, because I think, people in law enforcement hear, it feels like disband. It feels like defund, like strip them of all their resources. Now, if you say, reimagine policing, maybe, and maybe this is a tactic by some people to get the conversation. Someone who is a proponent of defund the police said that to me. We're starting the conversation here because we want to end up over here rather than starting the conversation where we need to end up. Maybe that's something, but I do think reimagining is a good thing. So I think expanding 911, my brother says, yeah, it's another one. So my friend Ray says, there's a commuter tax. So I organized the Rodney King protest. Mark Spatafore says I'm old. That's true. Demilitarize, immunity are both part of a federal bill. So Raven says, I don't understand the resistance to residency. I'd never want to go to teach in Liverpool. I live here in Syracuse. Why be in a job to serve the community you would choose to go outside of for your home? You've got no argument for me. And I think that, look, my job is so much more miserable because I live in the district I represent. Okay, like I go to anywhere, I bump into constituents who tell me stuff, and I'm walking my dog and my neighbor stops me. She wants the scoop on this or that, and that's but that's the job. That's what you signed up for, and it makes me much better at my job, and it makes my constituents much happier about who I am. And I understand to some level when you get to an assembly level or a police level, you represent a lot of people and it can be stressful. But I agree, we at the council have been really advocating for residency for a long time. We passed many resolutions about the Taylor Law, which is a state law, and that's why you can't have residency. We at the council can't force residency. It's regulated at the state level, and so we keep reaching out to our state representatives. But our state representatives, all the state representatives from upstate or from central New York, are in favor of this, but downstate New York holds such a powerful role in state politics that all the weight is in New York City, and they don't want to rile up the police union downstate. So that's why we haven't been able to get that through. But yeah, I think it's a win-win-win. One, the city gets more tax revenue. You think the schools are struggling? Well, if all the police and all the fire and every city employee lived in the city limits, there'd be more people paying into the tax base. There'd be more kids in the schools. There'd be more stability in the neighborhoods. And then it's not so hard to be an officer. More people want to move into the city. If the city is stable, more people want to move in. More people want to be a part of the story. Right now, a lot of people say, "Oh, the school district is horrible," and people who have kids, they say, "No, the school district's great. You're getting the bad press." And the more people commit to the city, the better that story gets, and the less that mythology permeates our community. So I think all around it's a win-win-win. So I hope, I'm hopeful that in this time we look at the Taylor Law again. I don't know if it's possible at the state level to propose some legislation that works differently for downstate and upstate. That's something I've thought about a lot. If New York City, you don't want to force your Staten Island cops to live in Manhattan in order to work there, okay. We're in Syracuse. We're in a different ballpark up here. A lot of the laws that work for New York City don't work for Syracuse. So, all right. Well, yeah. Phil says, I love reimagine policing instead of defunding. And I think that's where the conversation should be. And look, I think, I talk to police. They're not crazy about having to take on mentally ill people who are screaming. They know that that's not their bag, but everything gets thrown to them as a catch-all. So I think, we should be sitting, for me, I'm always a big proponent of, there's a line, bringing, you make, you make peace with people that you're having conflict with. If you were already in agreement on the same page on everything, you wouldn't have to make peace. You'd already be at peace. So making peace involves working with people that you might have a disagreement with. So I'm very much into having honest brokers from the police force sit with us and talk about reimagining. What could we do? What could we imagine? But, yeah, Parks and Rec pools needs more effective crime control, more effective than police. Some officers I spoke with said they're afraid that if they have arrested someone and that person's child is in the officer's class in school, they're afraid their kids would pay a price. So this is something we often hear. Officers don't want to live in the city because they don't want repercussions from the people that they bust or the people they have to deal with. I understand. But, as Councilor Bay pointed out the other day, we take people's houses from them. The council votes to take people's houses from them. There's a lot of stuff we do that makes people angry. And I would say this, imagine it's an old Western town. Imagine it's Deadwood, okay, or Laredo, or it's we're in the wild, wild West, right? And we hire a sheriff, and he says, but I won't live in the town because it's too crazy here. I mean, I get it. It makes it easier for you. But at the same time, if you're saying to us, 95% of police officers, that you won't live here, we've got a lot of unemployed people. I don't know. It's a nuanced conversation. I understand where a lot of those officers are coming from. But at the same time, I think we solve a lot of our problems. Look, Syracuse is like, it's like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but a stone always breaks on the 430th time you swing the hammer. It doesn't happen on the first one. So if we want to change the dynamic, if we want to change the story here in Syracuse, it takes more people committing to the city of Syracuse. And the more people commit to the vision of the city of Syracuse, the less need we will have for officers, the less, the more we become a community, the more the story changes, the more people commit, the more people say, a lot of people have talked trash about this place, but it's not actually as bad as you think it is. The more that becomes the dynamic, the better a shot we have. Looking at a few more. Oh yeah, some areas offending. Oh, there's Gabe. Welcome back. So Palmer has talked about a commuter tax. That's something that Green candidate Frank Cetera proposed again and again for people who don't live in the city to come in. I would love if we could get to if we get to an incentive situation where we compel people to move into the city. Right now, officers and firefighters get 50% reductions on land bank homes. That's pretty awesome. And I know a lot of firefighters and a lot of others have utilized that to start side hustles of rental properties. That's good stuff. I think there are incentives we could do. I would love for police to, but another thing that Councilor Hogan has been a big advocate of is recruiting people from our community to join the force, and that has been a challenge in a lot of ways. So I'd put it like this, and this is something and maybe we could do this more robustly. It's something that. You have so many spinning plates in when you work in government that you're trying to fix every single problem that the city has, and some of them you get more time for than others. But this is something that I've always wanted to see expanded, reaching out to, school programs. I know Officer Hanks went around and played basketball with kids and offered them free shoes if they could beat them in one-on-one to show them that, hey, man, I'm a pretty cool officer. Like I'm the guy who's tasked with keeping you safe. And that's a pretty awesome responsibility. And I came from this neighborhood, and now I protect this neighborhood, and I'm this guy. And so I know Chief Buckner has made a robust effort. When he was in Little Rock, he was one of the things he was most successful about. One of the best things that was in his resume was that he had diversified the force. He had brought, we need a force that looks like the city of Syracuse and that represents people from the communities of Syracuse. But here's the thing, it's the same with being a politician, right? Who wants to be a politician? Politicians are corrupt. Politicians are scumbags. And the same people say the same about police. Who wants to be a policeman? Policemen are horrible. Who wants to be a policeman? That's what the mythology is. And in both these jobs, I became a politician because I felt there were problems in politics, not because I thought everything was perfect. And you become a policeman because you feel you're not represented enough. I felt people with my worldview were not represented enough in politics, so I decided to run. At the same respect, if you feel this way about the police force, someone in the neighborhood, I wish the officers, we need people from the neighborhoods to try out, to become officers, to become firefighters. And right now I can tell you, I can't tell you what the testing programming has been like throughout the past historically, because I don't know historically, and maybe there's a lot of, I've heard a lot of people push back on the concept that they couldn't make it through the testing. The testing is rigorous and hard, but Chief Buckner is, he's monitoring that closely, trying to recruit people from the neighborhoods, trying to get people, from the city of Syracuse onto the force. So yeah, that's that one. Yep, and Oceana says you can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. I recognize there's problems. We both recognize there's problems. There's problems in politics. There's problems in policing. There's corrupt politicians. There's corrupt officers. Nobody become, the good people that do the, if good people just say, well, there's corruption in that field of work, I'm not going to join, then all we have is corruption. So, reading other comments here, you could approach the state to say a commuter tax is a way to fund local services without having to depend on New York State for funding. Yeah, I think that's, that's conceivable. That's reasonable. I think, again, I hope we can develop more incentives. Like I said, there are incentives right now for officers and firefighters through the land bank and through other things. The City of Syracuse, Say Yes, was meant to be an incentive. You could get free education if your kid, goes to a city school. So these were meant to be incentives. And I hope we can compel more people to stay in the city through incentives rather than things like commuter taxes. But, if not, I think we've been thinking about that a lot lately, right? With everything that's going on with the riots and everything. If people on the force don't listen and hear that this is what the community wants to see, they want to see you moving into their community. They want you to commit. If Buckner and those responsible for finding the new recruits and bringing the new classes in aren't operating with that in mind, then you will see things like commuter taxes and things like that will be necessary. Yeah, awesome. This is from Mary. Awesome officers have to deal with a culture that is really negative. I'll leave it there then, Mary. Yeah. My buddy Otis was writing about how he was an officer. He's a guy I went to Nottingham with. He used to chat reggae. I'd be doing my hip hop act. He'd hop up and do reggae tracks, and African American gentleman down south, and he's training officers right now. And it's like, think about that. Like, you were someone who, probably as a teen or in your 20s were skeptical of officers and corruption, and now you're training officers, and that's the same thing with me being engaged. Yes, Darren, I started this episode talking about the lead initiative. So, all right, well, it's almost at the hour mark. I'll probably tap out. What did Palmer say? 75% of people who work here do not live here, and we need the money. And that's just it, I think that's it, Yeah, Oceana is saying that her daughter is in a law enforcement program at PSLA. Yeah, get teen kids with officers that inspire them. If there's any officers out there that want to volunteer to the after-school club, they can reach out to Oceana. Like, I think that's, that's how we fix it. It's little things, little intangibles fix so much in our community, But anyway, I hope you found this AMA interesting. I'm going to do these from time to time where I talk about the concerns, things that I'm thinking about. Chris Carrick asked about 81, rezone. Both of those, I wish I had better updates. We just had a meeting with Mark Frechette and 81 just the other day. I don't have a lot to relay. We're going to do more soon. I'll update you more soon. Rezone is in the pipeline. The seeker is out. So we haven't had any movement on that, but as I understand it, the final version of rezone has been put out to Seeker, which is the state environmental quality review. So they're measuring all the impacts, all the effects that a potential rezone would have. Then they're going to bring this back to us. So that's where we are in the process. Rezone has been promised that it's on the plate, and it's coming up for years and years now, and we're hopeful that this is going to really happen here. So I hope that answers your question, Phil. Seeing a lot of rezones popping up. So that's where we are with rezone. Seeker, we've got it out there. We're investigating it. So I'm going to keep doing AMAs. I'll hop on from time to time, talk to you guys. Once again, so the big ticket items, I'll just recap the three major things I wanted to talk about in this episode. Lead initiative. The lead committee meeting is tomorrow night at 5:30. We're going to be talking about the lead initiative and moving forward. You can join us on WebEx. You can email Jay Conroy at syrgov.net if you'd like to participate and speak. So that's the big thing. The lead ordinance is coming forward. All right, Phil, no disabilities for rezone. I'll bring that up. I will bring that up with Owen. The other thing, the federal government, they rush through trillions of dollars to keep corporations and the big organizations afloat. Once the COVID hit, we've still yet to hear what's going to happen to city and state and municipalities. So reach out to particularly Congressman Katko. Ask your federal candidates, Fran Knoll and Dana Balter, their thoughts on that and what advocacy they're doing, because this is the whole ball game. I can't stress enough, and it's not just Syracuse. Most American major cities are going to be looking at some form of major loss and windfall in their budgets, and when that hits, that's going to mean less trash pickup or less officers on the street. It's going to mean all these things that you're going to see a lot of hurt, a lot of loss if the federal government doesn't figure out how to make municipal and state governments whole. We're going to see a lot of greater disparity, and I think that's what's in the pipeline during this COVID thing. What we're going to see at the end of this is a great, inequality is massive right now, and I think the biggest issue, inequity and equality, is the biggest issue in America right now, and certainly in Syracuse, one of the most greatest cities for segregation and economic disparity in the country. It's going to get worse unless we're really proactive and we watch what's coming from the federal government for municipal and state governments. So we got to keep an eye on that. And then the last thing is police reform. Check out the slate of bills that Assemblywoman Hunter and the other members of the state assembly are pushing forward right now. The repeal of 50A, the stat effort, a lot of things that will create a lot of transparency. So my focus on that is with the police reform. A lot of people have asked me what I think about defund. I will gladly get behind a reimagining of police force, that a conversation that incorporates the police. I call these officers for favors every day of the week. I have 5 favors to put in with my 2 captains right now. So I don't want to see them disbanded or, anything along those lines of disbanding the police, which is the impression we get from the words defunding. I'm not on board with, but I am wholly up for including more healthcare workers, more social workers, more mental health practitioners, more, et cetera, you name it. If there are ways that we can have the police dealing with just police matters and having other police dealing, other agencies dealing with other matters, if there's a way to reimagine a number of these things, then I'd love to have that conversation with the police at the table. So yeah. Darren's asking about the dynamic with the union. I think you should check. There's an article on my page today about initiatives Mayor Walsh took to try to get discipline out of the contract and negotiations with the union. I think that would be a big step in the right direction if we could do that. So there's a lot of other initiatives coming forward. I hope this has been helpful. This is an AMA, and Ask Me Anything. I'll do these from time to time for the podcast, but announce my 2 next guests. Thursday of this week at 5 o'clock, I'll be interviewing Hassan Stevens. He's DJ Maestro, an amazing DJ around town. He also runs the Good Life Foundation, and he was also a speaker at the rallies that occurred around police accountability and police brutality that occurred throughout the last 2 weeks. He spoke at both rallies. So I wanted to speak to him about his role working with youth and his insights and his thoughts about the rallies that have occurred over the last 2 weeks. So that'll be Thursday at 5. And then Tuesday at 5, I will be meeting with Chief Buckner to talk about his thoughts on reform and police accountability, and his take on the rallies and everything that's gone on, and trying to, and again, I think we make peace by talking to people from different walks of life. So I'm very intentionally trying to speak to someone who spoke about police brutality and the chief, back to back, so we can have those conversations from different sides and try to learn from each other. I love battling people on Facebook and debating people because I actually learn a lot. I like talking with conservatives and getting a sense of their worldview. Even if I disagree with most of what someone says, I like taking on what they learn. So that's a lot of the goal of this podcast. So anyway, I've rambled on long enough. I was really only planning to do this for 10 or 15 minutes. But it's been a good hour. So thank you guys. Thanks for checking in with me. Thanks for engaging in a conversation with me digitally. We'll keep that going. So tune in next Thursday, day after tomorrow. I'll be interviewing Hassan Stevens, founder of Good Life Foundation, DJ and cultural influencer in Syracuse, and a speaker at the rallies. And Tuesday, I will be speaking with Chief Buckner and picking his mind, Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in to Salt City Grind. All these episodes, again, are uploaded to YouTube. You can catch them on YouTube or on Facebook if you don't get to catch them live. Well, right now, in the next few days, next week, we are going to be building the website. The website is live, saltcitygrind.com. We'll be putting up Apple and Spotify uploading in the next few weeks. We wanted to get a few episodes together before we did that. So we're going to be putting those up on Apple and Spotify and getting those out there so you can subscribe on different formats and different things. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Bob Andrews, good to see you too, man. We got to get you on soon. And people keep asking me if I'm going to have Republicans on. Yes, I will. I want to talk to everybody and use this as a format for dialogue. So thanks for checking in, everybody. Thanks for chatting with me. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the feedback. Joe Driscoll, peace and love. I'll check you guys soon. Take care of each other, 315. Peace.